blood dripped from the brown and white paint horse, standing in the center of the auction ring, each crimson droplet striking the sawdust floor like a ticking clock counting down to slaughter. The once magnificent animal stood with head hanging low, ribs protruding beneath a dull coat splattered with red, not his own blood, but evidence of the chaos that had unfolded in the holding pens before the sale. The auctioneer's voice echoed through the cavernous building, his words falling flat as disinterested buyers scrolled through phones or whispered among themselves, barely acknowledging the trembling creature before them. Valor had been something once, a name that thundered across racing circuits, a flash of brown and white brilliance that defied expectations and captured hearts. Now that heart beat solely to keep him alive for a few hours more, until the kill buyers at the back of the room could transport him to his final destination. The bloodstains covering his distinctive markings became an excuse for potential buyers to look away, their discomfort masked by disdain rather than compassion. The auctioneer's voice grew desperate as he tried to spark interest. Who would start the bidding? Did anyone hear an offer? The crowd remained unmoved, laughter rippling through the room as someone muttered that a blood-covered mess wasn't worth the trouble. Whispers grew louder, laced with ridicule about an animal that appeared broken beyond repair. A woman in designer boots remarked that he looked diseased, her tone dripping with contempt. Others nodded, their judgments sharp and final. Valor's eyes, once bright with competitive fire, now seemed hollow, windows to a spirit crushed by years of suffering. In this grand echoing auction hall, filled with the scent of fear and indifference, he stood as a spectacle of rejection. No one spared him a second thought as the kill buyer in the back row casually raised his hand, offering the minimum bid that would secure the horse for slaughter. The ticking clock on the wall counted down the moments until the gavel would fall, sealing his fate with merciless finality. This was not the kind of auction where champions were celebrated. It was where broken animals disappeared forever. The slaughterhouse was waiting, and time was running out. Morning breaks cold and unforgiving as rough hands dragged Valor from the temporary stall where he had spent his final night of freedom. The paint horse flinches at every touch, his muscles tense beneath a coat dulled by neglect and marked with scars of varied age. His loading into the rusted trailer comes without ceremony or care, his body merely cargo now, weighed by the pound rather than valued by the heart that once powered him to victory. The trailer door slams with finality, metal against metal echoing like a judge's gavel. Valor shifts uneasily, finding no comfort in the swaying darkness. As the vehicle lurches forward, through gaps in the worn metal sides, slivers of landscape flash by, first the familiar rolling pastures, then suburbs with children who do not look up, then industrial zones where smoke hangs heavy in the air. The journey continues as the world outside grows increasingly desolate, as if the land itself is acknowledging the destination that awaits. Other horses share the cramped space, their fear a tangible presence in the stale air. Some are young, barely started under saddle, their confusion evident in wide eyes and trembling limbs. Others are old, bodies worn down by years of service now deemed worthless. Valor stands among them, somewhere between not old enough to have lived a full life, yet carrying the weight of experiences that have aged him beyond his years. The trailer finally slows, gravel crunching beneath tires, as it turns into a dirt lot surrounding a large metal building. The auction house rises like a monument to forgotten promises, its weathered sides housing the unmistakable scent of fear and finality. As the back gate drops open, Valor blinks against harsh fluorescent lights. Men with impatient hands and dead eyes roughly herd the horses into holding pen. In the shadows of the auction hall, men in worn hats and practical boots survey the new arrivals, their expressions calculating as they assess weight, meat quality, and potential profit margins. They are the slaughterhouse buyers, and they do not see beauty or potential or history, only flesh with a price tag, measured by the pound rather than by heart or history. Valor's nostrils flare at the metallic scent of blood that permeates everything here. Somehow he knows this journey ends tonight. The chaos from the holding pins spills over like a dark omen when the stallion before Valor fights back, thrashing wildly against hands that care nothing for dignity or fear. Blood sprays across the concrete floor, across the wooden rails, across Valor, who stands in the neighboring pen as the panicked animal's head crashes against a metal post. The handlers curse. Cattle prods spark blue against trembling flesh. And then stillness comes too suddenly. With no time to clean up the aftermath, they grab Valor's lead rope, his brown and white coat now splattered with crimson evidence of another's final defiance. The auction barn hums with the low murmur of indifference as horses move through the ring, each assigned a value and dismissed in seconds. When Valor's turn arrives, he stumbles beneath the harsh lights, disoriented and trembling. His hooves slide on sawdust dampened by blood, not his own. The crowd shifts uncomfortably at the sight, their whispers no longer hushed, but growing into mockery. Someone laughs about sending damaged goods to the factory. Another makes crude jokes about pre-tenderized meat. The paint horse's eyes roll wildly, catching reflections of faces that see only a problem rather than a soul. The auctioneer barely bothers with pleasantries, his rehearsed charm evaporating as he takes in the blood-splattered animal before him. He clears his throat, adjusting his hat, before announcing in clipped tones that they have an unregistered paint gelding, age unknown, condition as seen. His gavel taps impatiently against the wooden block, starting the bidding embarrassingly low. The crowd remains motionless, eyes averting from the spectacle in the ring, conversations continuing as if nothing of value stands beneath the spotlight. From the back row, a man in a weathered canvas jacket lifts his hand, almost imperceptibly. The Slaughterhouse buyer, right on schedule, offering the minimum price per pound that makes this transaction worthwhile for his business. The auctioneer nods, calling out the bid with practiced efficiency, ready to bring down the gavel and move on to something more profitable. In this moment, Valor's fate seems sealed, his worth calculated, not by the heart that once carried him to victory, but by the weight of flesh that will soon be processed and shipped overseas. The clock on the wall ticks forward, each second bringing the final strike of wood against wood closer. From the shadowed corner of the auction house, Mason Holbrook watches the proceedings, through eyes haunted by memories he spent 5 years trying to drown. The former trainer hadn't planned to be here tonight. A wrong turn on a back road, a flicker of nostalgia, perhaps some twisted hand of fate guiding him to this moment. The smell of sawdust and fear hangs thick in the air, familiar yet sickening after years away from the circuit. He sits motionless, a ghost among the living, nursing a styrofoam cup of bitter coffee gone cold between his calloused hands. The blood-covered paint horse stumbles into the ring, head low, eyes vacant. Something about the way the animal moves, even in distress, catches Mason's attention. His grip tightens on the cup, coffee spilling over weathered knuckles as he leans forward, straining to see past the crimson stains and years of neglect. The distinctive white blaze, shaped like a jagged lightning bolt. The 3 white socks and 1 black, the particular set of his shoulders, proud even in defeat. Recognition hits Mason like a physical blow, memory surging back with brutal clarity. Early mornings in the fog, the rhythm of hooves against fresh track dirt, a connection that transcended words or commands. This isn't just any auction horse destined for slaughter. This is Valor, his Valor, the stolen champion, whose mysterious disappearance had shattered Mason's reputation, ended his career and broken something essential inside him. Time seems to slow as the auctioneer's voice drones on. The slaughterhouse buyer's hand already raised in a casual gesture that would seal Valor's fate. Mason sees not the broken animal before him, but flashes of what had been. The winner's circle, roses draped across proud shoulders, the headlines declaring the emergence of greatness. And what could still be? Without conscious thought, Mason rises to his feet, his voice cutting through the murmured disinterest like a knife. The number he calls out is everything he has, the remnants of his savings, money set aside for truck repairs for next month's mortgage. The room falls suddenly, Completely silent, the slaughterhouse buyer turns, eyes narrowing as he studies the unexpected competition. The auctioneer stops mid-sentence, gavel suspended in mid-air, as if time itself has paused. In the ring, Valor's head lifts slightly, nostrils flaring, as if catching a scent from the past. For the briefest moment, their eyes meet across the crowded room. Horse and human, recognition flickering like a dying ember suddenly given oxygen. The auction house transforms from a place of resigned hopelessness to an arena of tense battle. As the gavel hovers suspended in midair, the auctioneer's expression shifts from bored indifference to surprise. As Mason's unexpected bid echoes through the cavernous space, the slaughterhouse buyer turns in his seat, eyes narrowing as he studies this sudden competition. A disheveled man in worn jeans, who dares to challenge the natural order of these proceedings. With calculated precision, he raises his hand again, increasing the bid with casual disregard for the life hanging in balance. Mason's heart pounds against his ribs, each beat a reminder of promises he'd made to himself after losing everything 5 years ago. Never get involved, never care too much, never risk what little he has left. Yet here he stands, voice steady as he counters with a higher number. Money set aside for his daughter's college fund, for the leaking roof, for the property taxes coming due. The slaughterhouse buyer frowns, genuinely confused by this escalating interest in a blood-covered wreck that should have disappeared without ceremony. His next bid comes with a warning glance, a silent communication that this is merely business, not personal. But for Mason, nothing has ever been more personal than the animal standing in that ring, trembling beneath the harsh lights. The figures climb higher, each number representing sacrifice beyond financial sense. Mason's phone vibrates in his pocket, his daughter calling, unaware that her future is being wagered on a horse that might be beyond saving. He ignores it, focuses only on the auction, on valor, on redemption that suddenly feels within reach at any cost. The slaughterhouse buyer's frustration becomes evident in the rigid set of his shoulders, the tightening of his jaw. This was supposed to be routine, not a battle. With a dismissive wave, he finally turns away, abandoning the fight for easier conquests. The gavel falls with thunderous finality, echoing in the sudden silence. Mason exhales, his body hollow with the weight of consequence. Valor is saved, but at what cost? The paperwork processed in numb haste. Mason leads the blood-covered horse toward his truck and single-horse trailer, a rig barely holding together, much like the man himself. Valor follows, with the mechanical compliance of an animal that has learned resistance. Brings only pain. Under the unforgiving glare of parking lot lights, the reality of what Mason has done settles over him like a physical weight. He has emptied savings, dead promises his finances can't keep, bought not just a horse but a living reminder of his greatest failure. He has no plan, no resources, and no answers for the questions waiting at home. The morning light falls hesitantly across Mason's small farm, illuminating the truth of what his impulsive bid has bought him. Valor stands rigid in the corner of the paddock, his body a map of suffering that the daylight refuses to soften. The blood has been washed away, revealing what lies beneath, a constellation of scars, each telling its own story of cruelty. Mason watches from the fence, keeping his distance, understanding too well what it means to be broken beyond recognition. The horse that once responded to the lightest touch now flinches at shadows, at rustling leaves, at the sound of Mason's voice, when it rises above a whisper. Days pass in this careful dance of avoidance, neither man nor horse willing to cross the invisible barrier between them. Mason leaves food and water, retreats, watches from afar as Valor cautiously approaches. Only when alone. The morning of the 5th day, Mason enters the paddock with a soft brush and stops 10 feet away, simply sitting on an overturned bucket, head bowed. An hour passes before Valor's curiosity overcomes his fear, taking one hesitant step closer, then another. It is then that Mason sees them clearly, the evidence of systematic abuse etched across the paint horse's body. Whip marks crisscross his flanks like cruel constellations. Burned skin mars the area where identifying marks would have been. Deliberate attempts to erase what made Valor unique. Most disturbing are the chemical burns along his neck and shoulder. Failed attempts to alter his distinctive coat pattern. Someone had tried not only to hurt Valor, but to erase him completely, to destroy the evidence of who he had been. In the quiet of the barn, Mason traces the marks with gentle fingers, reading the history of the lost years like Braille. Each scar mirrors something in himself: the financial ruin, the shattered reputation, the bottle that became his only friend. After Valor's theft destroyed his training career, Mason had been called a thief, a fraud, accused of selling the valuable horse himself. The whispers had hollowed him out, left him as scarce a shell as the trembling animal before him. Two broken spirits circle each other in the gentle evening light, neither knowing how to begin healing, neither trusting that redemption is possible. Yet something shifts when Mason begins speaking softly, telling Valor the story of their shared fall from grace. The horse's ears flick forward for the first time, eyes watching with something beyond fear. Recognition perhaps, or the faintest spark of memory. Not enough to bridge the chasm between them, but enough to suggest that perhaps bridges can still be built, even across such damaged terrain. The dusty box of files sits accusingly on Mason's kitchen table, each yellowed newspaper clipping and crumpled document, a piece of a puzzle he should have solved years ago. As spring rain taps against the window panes, Mason sorts through the evidence of betrayal with trembling hands, the weight of discovery pressing against his chest like a physical force. Across the room, Valor watches from his customary corner, his body still tense but his eyes following Mason's movements with something beyond fear, curiosity perhaps, or the first tentative roots of trust taking hold. The trail begins with insurance papers Mason had never seen, discovered through calls to racing authorities who had long written him off as complicit. Valor, it seems, had been insured for a sum that made Mason's breath catch far more than the horse was worth on paper, though never more than he was worth to Mason himself. The disappearance wasn't random theft but calculated sacrifice, a scheme crafted by owners who saw more profit in fraud than racing. As Mason uncovers each layer of deception, he speaks aloud to Valor, narrating the dark story as if unburdening himself of poison. The paint horse's ears flick forward at the sound of his voice, no longer pinned flat against his skull in perpetual terror. Small victories, Mason thinks, are still victories when you've had nothing but defeat. The evidence grows more damning with each passing day. Race fixing, systematic fraud, a network of powerful men who thought nothing of destroying both animal and man to protect their interests. Mason's name appears in forged documents, his signature a crude approximation that somehow fooled investigators eager to close the case. His career hadn't simply ended, it had been deliberately destroyed, a necessary casualty in covering tracks that led to men whose wealth made them untouchable. On the seventh night of his investigation, Mason sits on the barn floor, surrounded by papers that tell a story of calculated cruelty. His shoulders slump under the weight of years wasted in self-blame, in drowning sorrows that were never truly his to bear. A soft noise breaks his reverie. Valor standing at the stall door, neck extended, nostrils flaring, as if trying to understand the scent of Mason's despair. For the first time since bringing him home, the horse intentionally moves toward Mason rather than away. The moment hangs suspended between them, fragile as blown glass. With painful slowness, Valor takes another step, then another, until his muzzle hovers inches from Mason's outstretched hand. The touch when it comes is butterfly light, a whisper of velvet against calloused palm. Two broken creatures, finding in each other the first tentative proof that perhaps not everything stolen can remain lost forever. The night brings a warning as clear as thunder across the fields, headlights cutting through darkness as trucks rumble down Mason's long gravel drive. Word has spread of Valor's resurrection, whispers turn to headlines. The racing world that had once condemned Mason, now descending upon his small farm with ravenous interest. Morning brings reporters with cameras trained on fences, afternoons bring buyers with blank checks and honeyed promises. Evenings bring thinly veiled threats delivered by men in expensive suits who speak of legal consequences for stolen property. Through it all, Mason stands firm, his weathered hands steady on Valor's neck as the horse presses against him, seeking reassurance in a world suddenly too full of strangers. The paint horse, who once cowered at shadows, now watches visitors with wary intelligence, his body language shifting subtly with each new arrival. He senses which ones Mason welcomes and which ones make the man's jaw tighten, his shoulders square. The bond between them has crystallized into something beyond words, forged in the quiet hours of healing and shared nightmares. Mason refuses every offer, turns away every camera, his focus narrowed to the single purpose of protecting what was nearly lost forever. On the seventh night, after the news breaks, the warning comes not in headlights, but in their absence. Dark vehicles with engines cut, rolling silently down the drive. Well past midnight, Mason wakes to Valor's warning call, a sound between a snort and a scream that cuts through his dreams. 3 men move like shadows across the yard, bolt cutters glinting in moonlight, tasers visible beneath jackets. They've come to reclaim what powerful men still believe is theirs, what insurance money has already paid for, what should have disappeared from memory years ago. Mason steps onto the porch, shotgun hanging loose at his side, more warning than threat. The men hesitate, then continue toward the barn, where Valor stands, watching through the open door. In this moment of crisis, something shifts in the horse's demeanor. He does not retreat to the shadows or tremble with remembered fear. Instead, he steps forward into the yard, his head high, ears pricked forward, muscles tensed, not for flight, but for confrontation. The men falter at the sight, not the broken creature they expected, but a powerful animal standing his ground, flanking Mason with deliberate purpose. This is not the trembling horse from the auction ring, but a partner choosing to fight for his new life, recognizing enemies from a dark past and refusing to surrender. In this tableau frozen beneath cold stars, the balance of power shifts. The men exchange glances, calculating risks against rewards, then back toward their vehicles without a word. As taillights disappear down the drive, Mason rests his forehead against Valor's neck, feeling the strong pulse beneath warm skin. Both understand something fundamental has changed. They are no longer 2 broken beings seeking shelter in each other's damage, but something stronger forged in shared resistance against those who would destroy them both. The morning sun paints golden light across the fields as Valor races across open pasture, his brown and white coat gleaming with health that would be unrecognizable to anyone who saw him 6 months ago. The blood that once matted his fur has long been washed away, replaced by the glossy sheen of proper care and dignity. His eyes, once dull with resignation, now spark with life, as he moves with the fluid grace of an animal who has remembered what it means to be free. The scars remain, physical reminders etched across his hide, but they no longer define him. They are simply part of a story that could have ended in slaughter, but instead found redemption through a single desperate bid that stopped the clock when hope seemed lost. Mason leans against the fence, watching the transformation with quiet wonder. His own reflection in the barn window shows similar changes, the haunted eyes now clear, the shoulders no longer stooped with defeat, purpose restored to a man who had forgotten his own worth. The small farm that was once just a place to hide from the world has become something more, a sanctuary where broken spirits find second chances. 3 other horses, all rescued from similar fates at auctions across the state, graze beside Valor, each carrying their own histories of neglect and fear. What surprises Mason most is Valor's gentle nature with the newcomers. The paint horse, who once trembled at human touch, now approaches traumatized animals with intuitive understanding, standing beside them during storms, showing them where water flows cleanest, demonstrating through quiet example that trust is possible even after betrayal. He seems to recognize something of himself in their wary eyes, in their flinched responses, in their reluctance to believe in kindness. The investigation continues. Legal papers, filed against those responsible for Valor's theft and suffering. Some will face consequences, others likely won't. Mason has made peace with justice being imperfect, finding greater satisfaction in the daily miracles unfolding in his pastures. The racing world that condemned him now offers apologies, opportunities, chances to return to his former life. He declines them all, having found something more valuable than acclaim or vindication. A young mare rescued last week approaches Valor across the field, her movements still uncertain, ribs visible beneath her dull coat. Valor stands perfectly still, allowing her to decide the pace of their interaction. When she finally stretches her neck to touch his shoulder, Mason witnesses the moment with reverence. This is the true victory, not races won or wrongs righted, but the sacred transmission of trust from one healed spirit to another still healing. The single bid that stopped the clock that night didn't just save one life, it created ripples of redemption that continue to spread beyond anything Mason could have imagined. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of horses rescue and second chances. Your support helps share these important stories with others who need to hear them. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.